Well, today we are talking about emotions, a mixed topic for sure. In case you didn't know, we're talking about emotions. We love to reflect on our good ones, right? We love to reflect on the bad ones of others, rarely on the bad ones of ourselves. If the person that you wake up with in the morning wakes up on the wrong side of the bed, it could color your whole day or your week, depending on how horribly dark that side of the bed they woke up on was. I've learned that some sides of the bed are like Mordor, like Sam and Frodo are there trying to, anyway, If your boss pays you a compliment, a genuine compliment for the work that you've done, if he authentically appreciates you for the efforts that you're putting in, loves that you're on the team, that can make you happy with your job for the better part of a year. And so emotions are a regular part of our life. We're going to do three things here this morning. Number one, we're going to get a broad overview of emotions, all right, just so we're all on the same page together. We won't cover all, but quite a few. We're going to take a look at what the Bible says about the power of emotions, and then I'm going to give you a few ways, perhaps, that you could be more emotionally healthy. All right, so we are going to put up Robert Plutchik's emotion wheel on the screen right now. And so, yeah, there's a lot of them. Plutchik was a research psychologist back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and he came up with this really wonderful diagram for us to kind of see how emotions interact with each other and to kind of just be able to articulate those things. And so you'll see on the edges of the petals of this flower, if you will, we move from more mild displays of emotion to, as we move into the center, more visceral modes of emotion. And so on the outside, if we look at, the red one here and the green one here, we've got annoyance and apprehension. But as we move in closer, we get anger and fear and rage and terror, and it just gets more and more visceral, right? Another thing is between the petals, you'll see here between the yellow and the green one, we've got love written. And what Plutchik suggests is that they interact with each other, that joy and trust can operate together, that serenity and acceptance can operate together. Do you, when you look at this, see any emotions that you wish that you would have more often? Maybe? Do you see anything on here that reminds you of another person? What about this? We've kind of changed this diagram a little bit to be a little bit more 2017. What about this one? That works. That works. If you combine all of them, you get the poop emoji right in the middle, I'm sure. So what does the Bible have to say about emotions? Philippians 4, 6 through 7. I'll have all these on the screen, and we'll move through them pretty quickly here. The Bible says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which passes all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus." There are going to be some consistent undercurrents here as we look at these passages. Proverbs 15:18 says, "A hot-tempered person stirs up strife, but one who is slow to anger quiets contention." Ecclesiastes 3:4, "There's a time to weep, a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance." Later in the Bible it says, we weep with those who weep and we rejoice with those who rejoice, implying that we can move into emotion with people in a really healthy way. Matthew 5:4 says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." 2 Timothy 1:7 says, "For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control." Now, I've recently changed just in the past year how I read the Bible. I grew up a Christian, grew up in a Christian family, and so I have a lot of experience reading the Bible. But I've recognized that I all too often treat the Bible as this package of inspirational writings that are going to pull me out of my depths of despair, pass go, collect $200, skip the journey, and send me on my way. And it's done that for me many times, okay? But as I've gotten just a little bit older and I've experienced some of life's up and downs, I've pressed into the Bible as something that meets me along the journey, that I can go and I can reflect on other people's journeys as well, and how it wasn't just, straight from A to B, that there was a whole line in between A and B. And that's where much of life is found. Ben Rector puts it this way in his song, that life isn't the mountaintops, it's the walking in between. And the walking in between can get a little gruesome sometimes, can be a little cruel. Bishop Joseph Garlington says that God takes us from glory to glory, but it's hell in the hallway. And it's that can be true, but don't underestimate the power of the journey and the hidden gems in it. When we experience certain emotions along the way, they can be very transformative, even when they're negative. Certain emotions and the way that they come out of us can be a wake-up call that we need to make a change. Certain emotions that come out of us unexpectedly can be an acknowledgement that maybe our hearts are softening up more than we thought they were. So, let us depart from this atmospheric conversation about emotions, and let's get down to talking about how we can be emotionally healthy people. So I've invested a lot of energy in how to read my own emotions and the emotions of others, primarily because I've sucked at it so bad over the course of my life. And so what I'm going to share with you are just some phrases, some mantras, if you will, that I live by, that I really feel line up with the fruits of the Spirit, the way that God designed us to operate, that have helped me work through family conflicts, personal conflicts, really hard to navigate relationships, hard to navigate conversations, and they have downright saved my marriage. And I would love to share them with you. These are phrases that I've developed really from mentors and friends being brave enough to confront me and say, hey, Joel, check your blind spot, because you got a big, nasty troll back there and you don't see what it is. And I look and oh yeah, there it is. So I live by these. I'd encourage you to write them down, maybe get out your phone and put them in a note. There may be something helpful in here for you, okay? Number 1, here we go. The only person you can control on your best day is yourself. The only person you can control on my best day is myself. Revolutionary breakthrough, this one for me. There's so much wrapped up in this for me, but I'm just going to hit some really potent notes. So here we go. 2 sides to this coin. You can't control other people. You can't make them do what you want them to do. And I'm operating in the assumption that manipulation and abuse is wrong. Okay? Forgive me if that's not where you're operating, but you can't make them do what you want them to do. You can plant seeds. You can give advice, but they make their own decisions. You can help them be a positive presence in their life, but they make their own decisions. If you give someone advice, then they go and do something completely different, you can't take it personally. They make their own decisions. You can't control them. You can't tell them what to do. You did your part. You sent out the good advice. They didn't necessarily send a wise response back. That's their choice, okay? Side 2. You can control yourself. My son, Gabriel, who's 5, has this hilarious thing that he says whenever he breaks something. He's always tinkering. He wants to know how things work. And he just ends up obliterating whatever it is that he's trying to figure out. And I'll come in, I'm like, dude, what happened to the mirror? He's trying to figure out how a mirror works. Like, what happened to the mirror? He's like, my body made me do it. Like, no, you're in control. You get to make conscious decisions. You can choose to be loving. You can choose to be patient. You can choose to not take offense. We have this phrase that we use, you offended me, but we don't say it to the person who offended us. So usually what you hear is, they offended me. And I would like to suggest to you that relationships, perfectly good relationships, get broken all of the time because we think that a person has the power to help us step into offense. There's a difference between being offended and being hurt, okay? Draw that distinction. But I choose to step into offense if somebody does something off color, out of whack. It's not necessarily hurtful to me physically, emotionally, mentally. You can say no. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to go over to that person's house for dinner if they make you uncomfortable. You don't have to, all right? Even if you work for them. You don't have to. You know, you laugh because you've had this experience. Honey, we've got to go. No, you don't. If a person is being disrespectful in a conversation, you don't have to continue to participate in it. My wife has this great way. I married my wife when I was 20. I was a kid. Still, in a lot of ways, I'm a kid, but we've been married for 12 years. We started the marriage with a high degree of condescendence in my voice on many occasions. And I think if I was to look at the line graph of my life that the condescension is getting less, okay? Because one thing that she does is if I get condescending, she just hits that little red button calmly, not like, and throws it. No, because I've seen her do it with some other people too. She just hits the red button, puts the phone down. If we're together, she'll just end the conversation and walk out of the room. And that's my cue to know, oh, Joel, you were getting disrespectful. You don't have to participate in disrespectful conversations. That has been so valuable for me to know if I'm in a conversation with somebody who's disagreeing with me, I'm happy to stay there in the room with them, okay? But the conversation has to stay respectful. Otherwise, being in a place where, I'm lobbing insults at you doesn't help anyone, doesn't help the relationship at all. Everybody with me? By knowing you're in control of yourself, it takes you out of the victim seat. That just feels good to say. Number 2, love does not exist. Do you not like that one? Stick with me. Okay, I know it's heretical what I just said. I don't mean it. Of course, I believe in love very much. Give me 3 minutes and I'm going to explain. I'll be back in your good graces really fast. Okay, so we objectify a lot of things. To objectify something is to stand away from it, to observe it, to poke it, to prod it. I'm looking at this stand right now. I see that it has a large flat section that I can set my notes on that I'm not really following right now. I can hold this little spindle like right here, and that's kind of wobbly, but it has this really nice base at the bottom to give it stability. I've objectified it, okay? There are certain things that we interact with on a daily basis that I think, because of the nature of what they are and what they're not, are inappropriate to objectify. Here's an example. If you know somebody who is in a relationship and they're in a rough spot, you might hear them say, we need to work on our marriage. Boom, objectified. all of a sudden, you are not a part of me, and our marriage is separate from us. There might be factors in our relationship that need to be addressed. But we're not going to be able to step into a new chapter of health in that relationship until I decide, once again, to give myself to you. With me? We do this with love. We step back from love. We poke it, we prod it, we observe it, we see it in other people, we see where it's not, we see the absence of it, and view it oftentimes as something that I adopt, that I take into myself, that I, in some situations with people who are really hard to love, I have to dig it out of the ground and then pull out this box and dust it off and pull it out. And then, oh, I've got love to give you. You're hard to love. This took a lot to work for. What if love isn't something that we adopt? What if love is something that we give ourselves to? And in the act of giving ourselves to love, we have plenty to go around, even for those people who are hard to love, even in those situations where it's hard to do that. If I'm in a stressful situation, I tell myself this. I go, love doesn't exist. Love brings all things into existence. Love doesn't have meaning. Love renders things meaningful. Love doesn't make my kids the best kids in the world in my eyes, right? Like, my kids aren't perfect. When you say, like, my kid's the best kid in the world, you hear a parent say that? They don't really mean it, because they haven't met every kid in the world. No way. You haven't met every child in the world. There could be someone out there who's just like, wow, they're the best kid in the world. And two, you see all of their problems. You see all their beauty, you see all their pain, you see the struggles, you see the things that remind you of yourself in them. And instead of saying perfect, what they're really saying is, because I love you, because there is love, because I've given myself to love for you, you're rendered sublime. When we sublimate someone, we say, I see all your imperfections, I see your dirt, I see your beauty, but I love you anyway. So maybe instead of writing down love doesn't exist, maybe we could say love creates meaning. Love isn't something that I adopt. Love is something that I give myself to. There's been nothing in my life that I say to myself every day, multiple times a day, that shaped the way that I see other people, that shaped the way that I see God, that shapes the way that I serve him. The next one, I'll read the Bible passage that I got this from, and then I'll tell you what it is. So Matthew 8:23 through 27, I'm not going to have it on the screens, talking about Jesus here. Then he got into the boat, and his disciples followed him. Suddenly a furious storm came up on the lake, so that the waves swept over the boat. But Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him, saying, Lord, save us, we're going to drown. And he replied groggily, you of little faith, why are you so afraid? Then he got up, rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. The men were amazed and asked, what kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him. So here's the next little mantra. I only have authority over storms that I can sleep through. And I mean this in a miraculous sense, but more so, I mean it practically, because I feel like in the practical is where we experience the miraculous. I find that most worrisome things I face will overtake me if they steal my rest. And they do not have the right. They don't have the right now, because I am receiving the greatest gift on earth, and that is my breath that I'm taking without having done anything for it. I just needed to be born. If I'm getting this gift, there's no reason I can't sleep through whatever I'm facing. Now, if you're facing something that you can't sleep through, there's no condemnation in that. But the way that I view it is, if I can't sleep through this, like when Joe was getting ready to resign, okay, and I knew it was coming, and literally the day before that Sunday when we made the announcement, I had a hard time sleeping for about an hour. And then I realized that this was an opportunity for me to deepen my trust in God and his plan. We only have authority over the storms we can sleep through. So I pray something like this. I say, God, help me sleep through this. It might not be gone in the morning, but at least I'm rested. And when I'm rested, I have a better chance of seeing this problem from your perspective. So those three things are, on my best day, I can only control myself. Okay? Love doesn't exist. It brings all things into existence. It brings meaning. It brings life. And then 3, I only have authority over storms I can sleep through. The one last thing about emotional health, many of us know people who suffer from chronic stress, anxiety, or depression. Many of us, perhaps in this room, suffer from one or more of those things. And I don't want to skip over anyone here who feels that way. It's in when you're in a state of emotion like that, and you hear, oh, we're talking about emotion on Sunday. Maybe I'll show up and he'll say something that encourages me and helps me and meets me where I'm at. So I feel a sense of urgency to call that out. In September of 2014, on a Sunday afternoon, I remember getting dizzy, and all of a sudden, I woke up in the fetal position on my kitchen floor, shaking, feverish, and didn't know what was going on. I just thought I got hit by a really bad bug. So Nicole takes me to bed, tucks me in, and I sleep for 20 hours. I wake up, still feel horrible, get something to eat, get a drink of water, go back to sleep for another 18 hours. I wake up, and physically I felt better, but I had emotionally flatlined, which is not like me. I'm Mr. Feeler. I had no energy, which is not like me. I'm a bouncy ginger leprechaun half the time. And like, what is going on? So I flatlined emotionally, and then I kind of just started to dig below that flat line and just sunk into these depths of despair. And I was worried all the time, and I was anxious, and I was frightened easily. I mean, I'd be driving down the highway in my car, and like normal traffic, and somebody would just, a couple miles an hour faster than me come up here, and I would just jump. I didn't know what in the world was going on. And it all culminated 8 months later when my family and I were on vacation in Florida, and I couldn't get out of bed for 5 days. And my mom, who many of you know, she was with us for those 5 days and was worried and just didn't know what was happening to me. After that vacation, jumped on a plane, went to Minneapolis to do a gig. The next day, jumped on a plane to go to New York to spend time with 2 of my best friends in the whole world. And I got to our hotel in the city, and I'll never forget the look on their faces when they saw me. And they'd seen me a couple months before that. But I come into the lobby, and they look at me like, and the first thing out of their mouths is, dude, we need to get you some help. I just looked wrung out. Like my eyes were sunken in. I look rougher than I do right now. And so I'll never forget that. So I got back home, went to see a doctor, and I was fully prepared to do the whole antidepressant regimen and be on it for a year and wean off after a year if I was making progress. I was just ready for it, even though I was kind of dreading the whole deal. And what they found is that I had what they call adrenal burnout, stage 3 adrenal burnout, where my adrenaline was stuck on like a gas pedal, stuck to the floor, couldn't stop. Just kept going and going and going because of the pace of my life. And I'd never say no. I'd never stop. I'd just keep moving. And because of that, my serotonin, which calms you down, was non-existent. Any serotonin that would be pumped to my brain would evaporate. So we actually figured out a really non-invasive way to treat it and get me balanced out. I said no to a lot of things. I quit a lot of commitments that I had made because I wanted to get healthy. And I'm telling you, it took me 4-5 months from that moment to actually start to feel like myself again. So a whole year from the time that I woke up on the kitchen floor to starting to feel like myself again. And I say that because there are people that we're connected with, and maybe someone here is experiencing that. Stress, anxiety, deep despair, depression, and I don't want to skim over you. I don't want to give you labels and being like, oh, well, my friend here struggles with depression, and I don't understand. There's this parable, ancient parable, about how a person sitting by a river, another person comes up, hits him on the back of the head. Person who gets hit whirls around, ready to defend themselves, right? And the attacker says, okay, you can tell me, or you can hit me if you want to, but tell me, that sound that we heard, was that my fist or was that the back of your head? And the person responds, who was assaulted, and says, you can ask that question because you're not suffering the way I am. I'm not allowed to theorize because I'm in pain. So the advice that I would give anyone who's standing on the outside of those situations is you're not going to say something magical most of the time. I mean, I really believe that words create worlds, okay? But most of the time, for the person who's experiencing those things in the deep, dark places of depression, you're not going to say something that pulls them out of it. You can be encouraging. You can be present. When I was going through that, my mom, the only way she could have gotten closer to me on that vacation in Florida was to like sit on my lap. Like she was just pressed against me, right? And she wouldn't say a thing at all, but she was just there. And I'm telling you, that made such a difference in my life. Just to know that somebody was there and to know that they didn't want to fix me, that they were going to accept me just the way I was right now, even if it was dark. If you're going through it, if you're experiencing this, I don't want to make blanket statements and tell you to like change your diet or to give up caffeine or sleep more. Because we all experience this in a different way. But I will out that one of the biggest attacks that comes up against a person who is experiencing debilitating anxiety, stress, or depression is this thought that I'm worth nothing. You're worthless. You don't matter. You hear that. When I was in Florida and couldn't get out of bed for those 5 days, while I was awake, I was actually passing in and out of sleep. Right? I'd be awake and I'd be asleep. And when I was awake, I just hated what I was experiencing. I hated what I was putting my family through. I hated myself. And then I'd fall asleep and this incredible thing would happen. I'd fall asleep and this voice would come to me. It would just start to whisper purpose over my life. It's hard to explain, but I would be awake and just be in despair, and I'd fall asleep, and I'd just hear, you're loved, you are healed, you're clean, you're made free, you're okay. And so I think the most potent thing against our emotions, whether you are in a place where you're on cloud nine and doing great, or whether you're in the depths of despair, is to hear that you're loved, that you're healed, to be reassured who you are. We ask God to tell us what is true.